back to my YouTube channel. If you're new around here, then my name is Katie. I'm a full-time sketchbook artist, and what that means is I use a lot of sketchbooks. So today I'm going to be ranking them. I'm going to be going, it kind of feels harsh going from like worst to best, because some of these I don't hate, like hate is a very strong word, but some of them I obviously don't love as much as the ones that I reach for all of the time. So I do want to start by giving a little caveat that this video is going to be very, very subjective. I don't want this to be controversial at all. I just want to state that this is my opinion, and I know that we're all going to have totally different ideas for what our perfect sketchbook is, and these are just my thoughts. So I do use quite a lot of sketchbooks in my work, and I'm also a mixed media artist. So that means sometimes I might be using gouache, sometimes I'll be using a mix of mediums, and sometimes I'll be on a watercolour hype. So it really depends, and it does mean I reach for different sketchbooks a lot. But there are definitely ones that I feel like hold mixed media best, and are kind of good all-rounders when it comes to sketchbooking. So those will be the ones that I will rank more highly than maybe more specialised sketchbooks. So I'm going to be sharing all of my thoughts. I'll be sharing pros and cons for all of them because, like I say, I don't want to be super controversial, and I know that your ideas may be different from mine. But please do pop them in the comments. We do have a really lovely community here, so I'm sure it will all be fine. But I know that there are so many different sketchbooks in the world, and so hopefully this is helpful if you use mediums similar to me, or if you're interested in all the different types that are out there. So having said that, I can't test all of the sketchbooks in the world. There are so many. I still have some that I've bought that are untouched, like the Fabriano Venezia sketchbook, which I'm planning on doing a review on. But these are the ones that I personally have used quite a lot and know if they're good for me or not. So with that caveat out of the way, let's get on with ranking my sketchbooks from best to worst, and we're going to be starting with number 8, which is my least favourite. So for me, that is the Etcher The Perfect Sketchbook, which is ironic because for me this is my least favourite. This is quite an expensive sketchbook, and I think that often puts me off because I find the more affordable ones feel a bit more manageable for me. I'm not scared to create in it, and I actually won this on a giveaway, so I didn't pay the 40 odd quid that it was. I don't know if it's more affordable now, but for me this just isn't my kind of sketchbook. The paper is really thick, so it's really good for watercolours if you're putting in lots of mediums. I've used this before when I've been playing around with ink. And the paper is, I think it's 300 GSM. I don't have the info for this, so I'll put all the info for each sketchbook on screen so you can see a good overview of them. But this is a cold press sketchbook, so it means that the paper is quite rough. I used to always forget how to work out if it was cold or hot press. So for me, cold is when you get goosebumps, and that's when the paper is more rough and textured. So that's how I remember it, and then hot press is nice and smooth. But for me, it's just too rough. I struggled to put my pencil details on top, so although this is good for wet mediums, I couldn't then go on top as easily as I'd like with all my mixed media that goes on top, because I very rarely just use paint. I generally will always go in with pencils and sometimes Neocolors, so that's really important for me. So although this is the perfect sketchbook, it's not the one for me. I do really like Etcher as a brand. They do some wonderful paintbrushes. I really like their watercolour postcards, but for me this sketchbook just isn't the one. So that's why this one is the lowest on my list at number 8. Next up is one that I have reviewed on the channel before when I did my comparisons, and that is the white paper Royal Talens. Now I rave about the Royal Talens all the time, which is a spoiler for this list, but this is the white paper version. So it generally has the cork cover, and there are others in this range that have the white paper. It's really hard to find, so some of them have got different designs. So the colourful ones are usually the ivory paper, but the cork and the specific graphic cover ones have got the white paper in. Now, I love the size. It's really affordable, which is a definite plus point, but for me the paper is just not the same as the ivory one. This paper is really absorbent, and I found that when I was putting the gouache down, which you can see a more in-depth review of my comparison with these on my channel, so I'll leave a link up here if you're interested. But it left kind of like a mottling with the gouache, which I wasn't a fan of. And I do find that it buckles more easy. So it's not the same paper and just turned white. Obviously it's going to be made up of different stuff, and for me it's just not the paper that I prefer. So although it is the same GSM, it's 140 GSM and it's 80 pages, which is the exact same as the ivory one, the white paper just doesn't do it for me. I really struggle with this one. I haven't used it a huge amount, and that's because I wasn't in love with it. I think if I really liked it, I would reach for it more. And it's not just because it's white paper. I use a lot of white paper sketchbooks, and I do love the colour clarity. It makes things more vibrant when you're doing it on white paper. But this paper is too absorbent for me, and it just buckles too easily and it's just not my go-to. So that's why that one's number 7. Okay, so next up at number 6 is the Stillman Birn Zeta series. So I had a very, very kind person on a video recently share a lot of information about the Stillman Birn sketchbooks, and I think another series would be better, but for this one, this is the Zeta and it's just too smooth for me. I'm going to leave a link to the video that I mentioned with all of this helpful information from this wonderful commenter down below, because there are so many different types of sketchbooks in the Stillman Birn series, and for me it's a little bit of a minefield. But I actually bought this to work on my book on. So this has got loads of stuff inside that you'll see in my book, which is published next March. I'm going to do a little plug here. I've written a book all about sketchbooking, and I share some information about sketchbooks and how to use mixed media and all the different ways you can do that in my book, which is out next March. So pre-orders are open now if you're interested. But yes, this is what I did some artwork in. So it was a really good way to test it, and I bought a few different sketchbooks to just kind of inspire me, because we all love new stuff. And although this is really good thick paper, the paper is really, really good. It's very durable. It doesn't buckle at all because it is so thick. Again, I'll list everything on the screen. But for me, it's just too smooth. I feel like Goldilocks here, where the paper was too rough and now it's too smooth, and I kind of want something in the middle. But this one is just, there's no tooth at all, so it's almost like slidey. It's not glossy or anything, it is matte paper, but I don't know, I just found I need that little bit of resistance, especially for like my details. So although it does handle things really, really well, the texture means things don't quite sink in. Again, things were sinking in too fast, things are sinking in too slow. So maybe I'm just the hardest to please consumer ever. But for me, although I will finish this one, I won't be repurchasing it, and I'll probably try one from the different Stillman Birn series when I do want another thing this size, because I do really like this size. Pretty sure they do lots of different sizes and like landscape versions as well. But for me, this one just didn't quite hit the spot. Okay, so next up is the Pith Oro Blanco sketchbook. Again, I've done a review of this on my channel, so I'll leave that below. And I had really, really high hopes for this sketchbook, and I was disappointed. I really like Pith as a brand. They are eco-conscious, they're made in the UK, which I really like, which does mean it might be difficult for you to get overseas. But for me, I would say the Oro Blanco isn't the one for me. They have different types, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about one that I would recommend later on. But the Oro Blanco, again, the paper is just way too absorbent. It's an off-white, so it's not quite ivory, but it's not pure white. And it's 200 GSM, so it does hold things quite well, but I did find with the amount of media and paint that I threw on this, it struggled with not buckling. So I definitely expect quite a lot from my sketchbooks. I do throw media on there, and I do like to use lots of different things at once. And so the paper buckles a little bit, but it's quite good. I mean, 200 GSM is pretty thick for a sketchbook, and there are lots of pages in here. The other really good thing about this sketchbook is it does lay flat. So I really like that, and I really like the exposed binding, which you can see here. You can see the back is absolutely filthy, so it does get dirty because it is a matte cover, and I am getting used to it. I still use and reach for this when I want an A4 sketchbook, and I've used some markers in here, but I do find that it's a bit too absorbent, so when I put my mark down on the page, I like to have a little bit of time to smudge it out, and I don't quite get the time on here. And it also struggles with liquid watercolour and inks, and so it comes straight through on the paper. As I said, I did show that in the review video I did, but for me, because I can't use all of my mediums in here, it does make me reach for it a little bit less. So not quite as high up on my list as I expected it to be when I bought it, and I wouldn't be repurchasing this one again. At number 4, we've got the Clairefontaine Mixed Media Sketchbook. So this comes in different sizes. I do also have it in the very big size. Again, I use this for my book artwork. But this little square one has been such a little lovely sketchbook for me to work on, and I absolutely have loved working in this. So this is the Gold Line Mixed Media Art Journal. It's by Clairefontaine, and the paper is a 180 GSM. But I guess it's a downside is that there is one side that's textured and one side that is smooth. So for me, it doesn't bother me as much because the textured side isn't super textured. It's certainly not as rough as that Etcher one. But I do definitely notice it when I'm putting on my coloured pencil details that it's not quite as smooth. And so if you don't like having that different stock in your sketchbook, then maybe this won't be the one for you. But what I love using for this one is my watercolours. This is the one I reach for when I'm using my Kurotake Gansai Tambi paints, and it does handle other mediums really well. I've used gouache in here. I've used inks, and I've also used brush pens, and it's handled that all really, really well. I found that the paper doesn't buckle and it does hold things really nicely. Sometimes if you're doing a double page spread, you might find one half is smooth and one half is textured, so it does take a little bit of getting used to, but it's a lovely white paper stock, so it's not ivory toned at all. And I'm definitely going to be repurchasing this, especially for use with my watercolours, because it does handle them really well when I want to put loads of water on my page. So we're into the top 3 now. Now the number 3 and number 2 spot were very, very close, but in number 3 is a new contender this year, which is the Pith Cara Cara sketchbook. So I've got it in the royal blue one. They do come in different colours. It's a little bit smaller than A5, it's 200 by 148mm. The paper is again 200 GSM and it is ivory toned. Just like the Oro Blanco, it does lay flat, which I really like, and as I said, Pith is a very sustainable company. And I only got this, I think I got this in August, and it's definitely been a go-to. I really love the paper stock. Now this is where it gets a little bit confusing, because I spoke to Pith and they said that the paper in the Oro Blanco and the Cara Cara should be the exact same. And it definitely isn't, so let me know if you want a video about that and I can try and reach out to Pith again. But when I've spoken to them on DMs, they've said that it should be the same paper stock, but I've done some thorough tests with materials and it definitely isn't. So I don't know if I just have a really old Oro Blanco, because they changed the paper in that, I think it's coming up to 3 years ago now, so I don't know if I just got one that was really old stock, but the paper in the Cara Cara is so much better than the Oro Blanco. So it's really smooth, which is really nice, but it's still got that sort of resistance when you're putting something on the page that the Stillman Birn Zeta series didn't for me. It can handle all the paints and things I throw at it really, really well. Because it is 200 GSM, I find it doesn't buckle. Even though the Oro Blanco one did, this one seems to hold it better. I don't know if that's just because of the size. But yeah, I'm absolutely loving this. I definitely repurchase a Cara Cara sketchbook again in the future. I've tested it with the liquid watercolours and the inks and it doesn't go through at all. So it's definitely different paper stock and I love it. I'm really glad it has different paper stock. Definitely felt like a risk when I was buying another Pith sketchbook, but it's very different and I highly recommend this one. So you'll probably be seeing this a lot more on the channel, and I can do a full review as well for you if you'd like that. So that sketchbook very almost overtook my number 2 spot, which if you've been on my channel before, you know I rave about these. These are the Royal Talens Art Creation sketchbooks. So these are really widely available and they're very, very affordable. And that's what drew me to them in the first place. On my desk I've got a whole stack of all the different colours, and you can also get them in different sizes. So I've got a little 12 by 12 one, I've also got the A4 version. This is slightly smaller than A5, it's a little bit narrower, but I really like this format and I do reach for it quite a lot. I have been reaching for it a lot less this year than I used to, just because I've bought so many other sketchbooks that I'm now using. So it's taking me a lot longer to fill sketchbooks because I'm filling so many of them at once instead of just focusing on the one. But I think this is always going to be my comfort zone sketchbook. It feels like a really safe place. It's kind of where I built my career because I started doing my 365-day project in here. So I did my year-long art challenge in a Royal Talens sketchbook. And yeah, it just feels very comforting to me. I really like the ivory paper. One of the bad things is it does buckle with a lot of water. So I would say if you're using watercolours, this isn't the sketchbook for you. You can use them obviously a little bit, but if you're doing big washes, it will struggle. So I would say this paper isn't great for all mixed media in terms of if you're using a lot of wet based ones, but for gouache and the way that I work, it's absolutely great. And it's surprising how much it holds up. So this is 140 GSM, but it's amazing how much I can throw it on the page without it coming through. Now, it's not perfect, obviously, but for the price, I think it's really good, and I recommend this to all artists and especially beginners to give it a go. Because of the price, you're not scared to create in it, so if you mess up, you can just turn the page, it doesn't matter. There are 80 sheets in here, and I think that's probably why I put the Cara Cara in third, because it isn't as affordable, and so sometimes I feel like I'm a little bit more precious. Definitely getting past that now because I am a full-time artist and I create quite a lot. But I would say for this one, I think the affordability definitely puts it in second place. Okay, so here we are at number 1, which is the Strathmore Mixed Media Sketchbook. So I actually bought this one in New York, but I've recently found that you can get it here in the UK now, which I'm really, really happy about, and I bought this on Amazon. I'll leave a link to all of the sketchbooks if I can down below. But this is the Strathmore Mixed Media Paper Art Journal. It's a 500 series. This is with a soft cover, which I know some artists won't like because they prefer a harder cover, but for me this means I can take it out and about with me and it not weigh me down. It's also sturdy enough for me to still have it in my lap. I really like the size, so this is 7.75 inch by 9.75 inch. There's a lot of different versions of these Strathmore journals, so again, I will link the exact one I use down below. 64 pages, so a little bit less than others, but the stock is 190 GSM, and it's a really nice white. So this is a new one. This is brand new because I've recently filled up the other one. So I did repurchase it, which is always a good sign if I liked a sketchbook. If you want to see a full sketchbook tour of this one, I'll leave it linked up in the cards. But I haven't quite broken this one in yet, but I know I'm going to love it. It's the exact same stock. It's really, really nice. The paper isn't super smooth, so it does have a little bit of tooth, which again, I really like. And it's not so rough. It's not as rough as the Clairefontaine, and certainly not as rough as the Etcher. So it feels like the perfect balance for my apparently Goldilocks taste of wanting it not too smooth and not too rough. But yeah, I really like this one. It does handle every single media, so all of my watercolour, my gouache, my brush pens, it handles it all beautifully. It's also not super pricey. It's pretty average, I'd say. It's definitely on the higher end. It's certainly not as cheap as the Royal Talons, but I think for what it can handle and for the amount of use I can get out of this, it's definitely worth it, and that's why it takes my #1 spot. So I hope you found that video helpful. I know it's a little bit different for me, but because I am a sketchbook artist and I use them quite a lot, I feel like I have quite a lot to tell you and I can test them all out and share my thoughts. So do let me know what you think down below in the comments, if there's a sketchbook you think I'd really like, or if there's one that you absolutely love and I haven't mentioned, please do put them in the comments. As I said, I'm not trying to slate any of these sketchbooks, they just don't work for me personally, and I hope this is helpful if you're using mixed media and want to see the sketchbooks I recommend. So a big thank you for watching, a huge thank you to my patrons. Without their support I wouldn't be able to do these free weekly videos on YouTube and buy all of these sketchbooks, so a huge shout out to them. As I said, my book is available to pre-order, so if you haven't already I'll pop the link in the description and on the end card, but if you have, thank you so much for your support, I really do appreciate it. I can't wait to hear all about your sketchbook recommendations, and I will see you next Sunday in a new YouTube video. See you later!